She's an astronaut, an author, and a motivational speaker, a distinguished Navy test pilot, an aerospace engineer, and a world traveler. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me with a warm BBB welcome for Susan Kilrain.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, what a great welcome. One might think that my kids must think very highly of me as an astronaut. We have 4 kids, and not too long ago I got a call from the producer of the show Top Chef. Have you heard of Top Chef? And they wanted me to fly down to Houston and be a guest judge on one of their episodes, and I wasn't really into it. I didn't have the time. So I asked one of my daughters who I knew watched some of these shows on TV, the cooking contest, and both of my daughters were in the kitchen. "Mom, you've got to do it." And I'm like, "Why?" "Well, Mom, this'll give you street cred." Wait a second. I have flown in space twice, and being on Top Chef is gonna give me street cred? "Yeah, Mom." So I went down to Houston and was a guest judge on Top Chef. Now I have street cred. I didn't bring a translator. I'm from Georgia. Y'all means you all, and I use it often. I am a 2-time space shuttle pilot, a test pilot. I've had the opportunity to fly in space twice, and I'm going to take you on a journey into space, so strap in because I've got about 85 slides to cover in about 20 minutes. Y'all ready? Excellent. So I grew up in Georgia, and I am an unlikely astronaut. You can see the list of excuses, the obstacles I had to overcome, and what's significantly missing there is that I was a girl. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, there were no women astronauts, but I didn't know that. We didn't have a TV. So I didn't know that no woman had ever been into space, and fortunately for me, nobody told me that a woman couldn't do it. So, what did I know? My father used to take us to the local airport to watch the airplanes take off and land because it was free. It was entertainment for the 4 of us. We'd lay on the station wagon for hours, and I was mesmerized watching the airplanes go around in circles. And I thought, boy, I would love to be a pilot someday. Laying out in the grass in the backyard, gazing up at the stars was all it took to inspire me to want to be an astronaut. But I was pretty nervous when I went into the kitchen one day to tell my father I wanted to be an astronaut, because I was quite the daddy's girl, and had he discouraged me, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. But he said the most magical words: "You can be anything you want to be." I learned 2 things that day. 1, to shoot for the stars, and 2, that when I had kids, I was going to also encourage them to shoot for their stars. So thanks to my dad, I went on to become an astronaut. First, I learned how to fly. When I was 17, I got my private pilot's license in an airplane like this in Augusta, Georgia. And then I went off to college. Went to Georgia Tech, got an aerospace engineering degree, a master's in aerospace, worked for Lockheed, and I was bored out of my mind, sitting at a desk all day, every day, in the wind tunnel. And I really wanted to be an astronaut, but I didn't think I had what it took to stay in that job. Fortunately, my boss knew astronaut Dick Scobie. He was the commander of the Challenger mission, the ill-fated Challenger mission. But he put me in touch, my boss put me in touch with Dick, and he recommended that I join the military and become a test pilot. And I thought, what a great idea. I can fly, I won't be sitting at a desk, and then someday I'll be an astronaut. So I went straight to the Air Force recruiter, and they quickly told me, I'm sorry, we've met our quota for women pilots for the year, and we're not taking any more. Well, that was the first time I had been told no because I was a woman. Fortunately, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you go to the Navy recruiter? I didn't even know the Navy had airplanes. I thought, okay. So I went to the Navy recruiter, and shortly thereafter, I got my hair all cut off. I was marching around at Aviation Officer Candidate School getting screamed at by the drill instructor. There were 60 people in my class, and I was the only woman. The good news was I had a room to myself. 13 weeks later, I got commissioned in the United States Navy, and I went off to flight school. Primary was a piece of cake. I already had my commercial license and an instrument rating, but then I got selected for jets, which is what I wanted, so I could go to test pilot school and be a space shuttle pilot, and I had to land on an aircraft carrier. And the airplane you see on the top slide there, a T-2, was the first airplane we landed on aircraft carriers. There's no instructor in the back seat because nobody's stupid enough to get back there with a student pilot landing on a little tiny boat in the ocean. But it went okay. Probably the scariest thing I've ever done in my whole life. And remember, I've flown in space twice. Went off to advanced flight school in the A4, the other airplane you see up here, also landed on the aircraft carrier. That's the airplane where we learned how to drop bombs and dogfight with each other. Had a total blast doing all that. They kept me on as a flight instructor for a couple of years, and I got to teach the student pilots how to dogfight in the air. I don't know, it must have been the math about it or something, but it just made sense to me. And then it was time for me to go out into the world and get my fleet aircraft, and it was the second time I had been told no because I was a woman. We had a combat exclusion policy in place where women were not allowed to be put in position of being in combat, which meant I couldn't fly a combat-rated airplane in a combat role, couldn't be stationed on an aircraft carrier, so the women were assigned support roles. And mine was flying a combat-rated airplane, but not in a combat role and not off of an aircraft carrier. I flew the A6 for a while out of Key West, Florida, where we had electronic pods on our plane to simulate the enemy's missiles, and we would attack our own ships for training before they deployed overseas. And I started to apply to test pilot school because this was the golden ticket to become a space shuttle pilot. A friend of mine had been to test pilot school, and he took me up to Patuxent River, Maryland, so that I could meet the commanding officer. I took my record up there, and he said, wow, your record is very impressive. He liked my flying grades. He liked my fitness reports where I was rated as an officer and a leader. And he sat right in front of me and said, you know, your record's good. However, the last woman to come through here didn't do very well, and I'm not willing to take a chance on another woman. I was floored. I thought, oh my goodness, I am being judged by the performance of somebody I've never even met simply because of my gender. Anyways, fortunately, as things are in the Navy, commanding officers come and go. And I applied 3 times to test pilot school, and by the 3rd time, there was a new commanding officer, and I finally got selected and went off to test pilot school. The hardest year of my life. It's like taking final exams every single day. We're doing very precise technical flying while we're taking data. We're flying the airplanes we had never been in before, flying them to the very edges of their envelope, where sometimes you ended up going out of control and having to recover. And then we would take all that data and use the calculus we had learned to write reports. So anyways, it was a tough year. But I finished, and something magical happened. The combat exclusion policy for pilots was repealed, and women could now fly combat airplanes. And I was very fortunate and got to get into the mighty F-14 Tomcat. How many of you have seen Top Gun? Right? So they selected 2 women pilots to go to California to fly the Tomcat, and then I was selected as one woman to go, the only woman to go to the East Coast to fly the Tomcat. The men did not want us there. There was no doubt about it. How could a woman handle such a macho, manly airplane? And so I felt like I was being looked at under a microscope most of the time. Some were very vocal about not wanting me there. However, it was time for my first flight. And the commanding officer said, I'm going to fly with her. I'm going to, see what she's got. He's sitting in my back seat. There are no flight controls in the back seat of a Tomcat, so he is completely at my mercy. We get about 100 miles off the coast of Virginia when I have a hot oil temperature light. I have to shut an engine down. The engines are far apart, so it causes a lot of yaw. I have to correct for that. The hydraulic system that was controlled by that engine is supposed to cross over to the other engine. It doesn't. I'm down half my hydraulics, down an engine. The weather comes in. I'm flying through the soup. He can't do anything to help me, so he's talking 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I'm tuning him out, la, 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 because I can't think. There's snakes in the cockpit, And here we go. We got to fly back to the field, and all this is going on. This is my very first flight in the airplane. It's like some sort of nightmare. So I had to lower the arresting hook, which normally we only use when we land on an aircraft carrier, but because the hydraulic systems weren't all working, I had to do it at the field. So I'm taking basically a carrier landing at the field on my first flight with the senior dude in the back seat. And it worked out okay. I landed, and then the adrenaline hit, and my knees were knocking. I shut down the airplane. The fire trucks come rolling out. And in retrospect, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. Right? Never again did I feel like I was being looked under a microscope, They realized that, yes, I could fly the airplane. And I hated to tell them, but the airplane doesn't know the gender of the person sitting in the seat. Thank you. That was an exciting flight. We haven't even gotten to space yet. So I interviewed with NASA. 6,000 applications showed up. They decided to interview 120 people. And what are they looking at in the selection process? You guys might recognize these things. This is the same things that the Better Business Bureau is looking for, right? Integrity and trustworthiness. And what skills do you have in your business? And do you have a clean record? Same stuff that NASA's looking for their astronauts. Can you be a leader? All of those things are basically good at every company, NASA included. And once again, I was an unlikely astronaut. There were 3 women pilots interviewing for the position of pilot, space shuttle pilot, along with a whole bunch of men. I was most junior. I was the youngest, least experienced. I figured there was no way I was being selected. I don't know. Maybe they liked the way I said y'all. But off I went to NASA. And we got to fly the T-38. Now I'm flying an Air Force jet. How about that, Air Force? A lot of fun. Got to fly the shuttle training airplane. It's a Gulfstream that's been modified to fly just like the space shuttle, where you put the reverse thrusters out in the air, which would be a death sentence for most people, most flights, but we got to use this as a training aircraft. And now, 2 years after I got there, it's launch day. I'm getting suited up, getting ready to go out to the space shuttle. We're all smiles, the weather's good, the shuttle's good on the launch pad, and it's almost like being a rock star for a day. The helicopters are flying overhead, security everywhere, people are cheering, and we go out to the shuttle. And I often get asked, what are you thinking? Are you scared? Are you nervous? What are you doing? How does it feel when you launch into space? And I can honestly say, I had no time to be nervous or scared. I was really busy making sure I did the job right. I had so many systems to start up and make sure that I did it in the right order. I didn't want to scrub the launch because I didn't do something right, and it has happened before, and I didn't want to be that pilot. As the G-forces are increasing, I'm focusing on what is going on with the systems. Are they working? Ready to take over and fly manually if things start going awry. We're going into space about 400 kilometers up, and it takes only 8.5 minutes. The rockets stay with us for 2 minutes, and then they jettison off, and then we have 3 engines to get us the rest of the way. And as soon as you get there and the engine shut off, you're weightless. It happens really quickly. You don't have time to be scared, not sitting in the front seat. But we had a problem. Shortly after we got on orbit, Mission Control called up and said, one of your fuel cells isn't working properly. That's where we made our electricity. We mixed oxygen and hydrogen together to make electrons, to make electricity. And we had 3 of these systems on board. Had we let it keep running, it could have caught on fire, which is really scary in space. So we had to shut that fuel cell down. We're left with 2 electrical systems now. We're fine, we're safe, we have 2/3 the electricity that we need, but we're safe. But we are 1 failure away from not being able to get home safely. And NASA never likes to be 1 failure away from losing astronauts, so we had to come home after a few days. Fortunately for us, they decided the science we had to do was too important not to do, so they turned us around in 3 months. Same crew, same shuttle, same experiments, everything. And we launched 3 months later. And then we got to really enjoy and do the science we were supposed to do. This is what it's like in space. You float. You could twirl around all day if you didn't have anything else to do. Eventually you would get sick, probably. I'm going to go through a little bit about living in space. You sleep in a cubby hole like this. It's about the size of a coffin. I'm guessing none of you have ever slept in a coffin. Claustrophobia is a disqualifying thing. They test you for that before they even select you to be an astronaut for the obvious reasons. The food, you can live on it. You probably wouldn't want to forever. It tastes pretty bland. Your taste buds get lazy in space. But we have some fun things to eat also, like pizza and M&Ms and pudding. And we can have fun with our food. Astronauts are like big kids. But this is actually a fun thing to show to school-age kids. It's about cohesion. It's teaching science in a way that is super fun and showing what happens when the 2 balls of juice bounce into each other and it becomes 1 big ball of juice. And the kids get all excited and they say, what happens if you push your finger in it? Can a goldfish live inside of it? What happens when it hits the wall? Anyways, it's all about making science fun. But we're there to work. And all the science that we did was about making life here on Earth better. You guys have talked about golf a lot tonight, actually. But when we were in space, one of our tasks was to make metal alloys, lots of metal alloys, and we were targeting the pink oval on that slide, the glassy alloys, where they're strong yet still flexible. So if you're a golfer, golf clubs today are made using alloys that we first made in space. Yeah, and you can do this in the weightlessness of space really quickly. You can make perfect alloys really fast, make hundreds of them, bring them home for them to be analyzed. And of course, the golf clubs aren't made in space, but once they find one that they really like the properties of, then they can mass produce it. In the weightlessness, the heavy stuff doesn't sink to the bottom, so it's just really easy in space. If you have an iPhone in your pocket, same thing. Some of the alloys that we discovered, because now when you sit on your iPhone, it doesn't break in half. We did combustion experiments. The hot air doesn't rise in space because there's no gravity effects up there. I mean, gravity's still there, you just can't feel it. And so Fire is a sphere. That's a very simple math equation. And we were studying fuels and filming them as they burn, looking for the soot production, all about cleaning up our air here on Earth. Protein crystal growth experiments have been going on since the beginning of space travel, and we're looking for protein crystals that can be used as vaccines or cure diseases. Same theory with the weightlessness there. With only 7 people on board, we got to do all the tasks. So I was trained as the doctor, the photographer, the repair person, the trash collector, and the computer repair person as well. So I had a lot of tasks on board. As a pilot on a science mission, I wasn't really trained in much of the science, so I had all my time to do these other things. What do you miss when you're in space? You miss your family, your dog. You miss good food. You miss a good shower, let me tell you. And you miss gravity after a while. You just want to sit down and take a load off, and it's not really possible. It's time to come home now. What I considered the most dangerous part of the flight, flying through this fireball. The friction of the shuttle coming into the Earth's atmosphere makes a fireball around us. We're inside a fireball 2,000 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the glow you see out the window. This is the phase of flight that cannot be practiced in a simulator. I mean, you can practice the procedures, but they can't simulate what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like. This is the part of the flight where the Space Shuttle Columbia was eventually lost a few years after I was flying in her. When something came off during launch, it put a tiny pinhole in the leading edge of the wing, and that fire was able to get in and burn up the flight control system. Landing is very sporty because there are no engines when we come home. So it's a 200,000-pound glider with little itty-bitty wings, so it doesn't glide. It falls like a barn door from the sky. So we fly a very steep glide path, about 20 degrees, and we keep that up until 2,000 feet over the ground when we finally start to raise our nose so that we can arrest our rate of descent and slow down. We don't even put our landing gear down until we're only 300 feet over the ground because you're not gonna, what are you gonna do? You can't go around, you can't try it again, and the gear is a lot of drag out there. So we wait till the very last second before we put the gear down. And then we'd have a parachute that we stick out the back to help reduce the wear and tear on our brakes. Very happy to be home. Out in front of the space shuttle, we put on a small press conference. And despite the fact that we all look very cool there and that we're just, perfectly standing there, if you touched us, we'd probably fall over. The vestibular system in your ear has had nothing to calibrate on for 2 weeks, so it has taken a vacation. We have no balance at all. In my house, when I got home, I would run into the walls. It takes about 48 hours to start getting some of that balance back. We're not allowed to drive for the obvious reasons. You can't pass a sobriety test. Many astronauts have been known to hand somebody something and then let go, thinking it's going to float. It takes a while once you get back home. All right, how about this? Everybody recognize this beautiful location? Hello, Chicago. All right, usually I do this as a quiz, but you guys are way older than middle school kids. They're about the only ones that get them all right. This is Chicago at night, but I just pulled out the easiest one. So please, feel free to shout out where we are in the world. Come on, anyone? I heard it over there, the Strait of Gibraltar. Very nice. The Mediterranean Sea's in the middle with Africa on the bottom and Europe on the top. How about here? Yeah, Egypt, Red Sea. More of the same area. This is the Nile River with the Red Sea. And we're going to zoom in on Cairo. How many of you have heard that the only man-made thing you can see from space is the Great Wall of China? Okay, I didn't see the Great Wall of China, but I certainly saw the pyramids in the middle of the slide there. Lots of runways, the wakes of ships, some roads. All right, where are we? This is also the Red Sea. A big dust storm went across the Arabian Peninsula, the Red Sea, all the way across northern Africa and halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. It was massive. All right, where are we now? Yep, the UK. Now? This is a funny photo because it's a fisheye lens, so it makes Florida look bigger than the whole rest of the United States. Senator Nelson used to have this up in his office on the Hill. Where are we? Panama. That's an easy one. Hello? Hawaiian Islands. How about here? No, not Venezuela. Australia, the Great Barrier Reef. Very good. How about here? You can't miss this. Yeah. These islands are crazy in Dubai. The world and the palms. And how about, everybody knows Italy. Kicking Sicily there. How about here? Crete, Greece, all of it. Yep. Anyone? Nope, not Nicaragua. Istanbul. Who said Istanbul? Give yourself a pat on the back. And then we saw 7 active volcanoes and 3 active hurricanes. And this is not a space shuttle photograph, but I love this 3D satellite image of Manhattan. Sunrises and sunsets. When you're in space on the space shuttle or the International Space Station, you're going 17,500 miles an hour. That means you orbit the Earth every 90 minutes. So you have 45 minutes of daytime, 45 minutes of nighttime, and the view is spectacular, but it lasts 9 seconds every sunrise and sunset. International Space Station's up there. It's been over 2 decades since all humans have been on the face of the Earth. That's what it looks like inside, mostly a bunch of cables. Can get there either by the Soyuz or by SpaceX. SpaceX is pretty cool. I like that the booster's landing out in the middle of the ocean. I think that's the coolest technology lately. Boeing Starliner can soon take astronauts up there. The Chinese have a space station with 3 astronauts on board. We've gone past the moon again, about to send people back to the moon, send the first woman to the moon, first person of color on this massive rocket here. That's the trajectory it took out past the moon. It's a beautiful sight. It's one of my favorite pictures here of the Earth and the moon in the same shot. There's a little mini space race going on between Elon Musk and NASA. Who's going to get to the moon or to Mars first? Why are we going? Well, we want to set up an outpost on the moon and then get ready to go to Mars. We can mine some resources. We can get used to living off the planet. We can study things. There are a lot of challenges to going to Mars. Mainly, it would be nice if we could generate a way to get there faster. That would solve almost all of the challenges. But why? Why go? And I want to say, how many of you grew up in the 60s and 70s watching men walk on the moon? Boy, that was like an entire inspiration for kids everywhere. Tons of kids wanted to grow up and be astronauts. Most of them never became astronauts, but they maybe went into the sciences, into the engineers. They've done great things. Same thing's happening with Artemis now. We're creating an Artemis generation. James Webb telescopes looking further into our universe, creating amazing images. How about this DART? Anybody know about DART that ran into the asteroid and moved it off its trajectory? One day this technology is going to save our planet from an asteroid impact. I'm going to leave you with a couple of photos that are my favorites. This one because it is amazing in a sad sort of way. When you look down at the Earth at night and you see black, that's typically water. But in this particular slide on the bottom right is South Korea, which makes that black part North Korea. They say you can't see borders from, country borders from space, but you can definitely see this border. And this is my other one that I like to point out how fragile the Earth's atmosphere is. And no one more so than astronauts can really appreciate how thin our atmosphere is. I am an unlikely astronaut, SusanKilrain.com. My experience with the BBB was meeting Carl in Antarctica of all places. I was a guest lecturer on the cruise that he and Shay were on, and we got to spend a lot of time together. I have the distinct pleasure of saying I think I took more photos than he did, which Shay says there's no way. My husband and I bought a house back in 2003 and got taken by a contractor. That's when I learned about the Better Business Bureau, and I use it religiously now. My husband's a SEAL, so his steely eyes at that contractor somehow managed to get all of our money back. But now we're back in that house again after moving around the world for the military. He's just finished up 38 years of service and retired. So we've been renting our house out for over a decade, and we've just moved back in, so you can imagine we need lots of work. And so I'm back on that Better Business Bureau website all the time. So I really appreciate what everyone in the organization does. Anyways, it's been my pleasure to talk with you, and I hope to spend some more time with as many people as want to come ask questions. Thank you.